Welcome back, everybody, to Getting In a College Coach Conversation. It is our 300th episode. I said I was going to announce our winner, but you know what? I'm going to make you wait a little bit longer, and I'm going to announce the winner at the end of at the start of our third segment. But right now, we're going to get right into your questions. And as frequently, Shannon Vasconcelos is here to do this segment with me. Hi, Shannon.
Hi, Beth. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. For those of you who are new to the show, Shannon is a former financial aid officer at both Tufts and Boston University, and she regularly does the listener questions section with me. All right. Why don't we jump in here? Shannon, I'm going to go to our list. It's like the first time I've ever done this before. Okay. All right. Here we go.
Yes.
Finance question comes to us from Deborah, and Deborah asks, we plan to submit the FAFSA because some of the colleges on my daughter's list require it for merit aid, and we'd also like the flexibility to apply for federal loans. We have no expectation of receiving need-based aid. Some, maybe all, of the college applications include a question as to whether my daughter intends to apply for need-based financial aid. Is a no answer inconsistent with filing the FAFSA? If so, should we send copies of the FAFSA only to the schools that require it for merit-based aid? Popular question.
Yeah, we get it all the time. And I would say no, filing the FAFSA is not inconsistent with saying no to that question on the Common App about whether you intend to apply for need-based aid or not. You are not applying for need-based aid. You say you're submitting the FAFSA because some of the schools require it for merit scholarships, and you may like to take advantage of some of the student loans that do in fact require the FAFSA. So that it is completely fine to say, no, I'm not applying for need-based aid, but still file the FAFSA because it's needed for those other things. Now, having said that, the issue here that the only concern about filing the FAFSA would be at potentially some schools that are need aware, as opposed to need blind. We've talked about this before on the show. If a school is need blind, they guarantee the fact that you might be applying for financial aid will not in any way affect your admissions decision. If a school is need aware, they reserve the right to consider whether or not you may need financial aid when they're making their admissions decision. Now, and that is one reason, it's not the only reason, but it's one reason why they ask that question. Some schools choose to ask that question on the admissions application, so they'll know whether you're applying for need-based financial aid or not. Now, so you should be just A-okay, and there should be nothing more to say, but as you can tell, Beth, I'm going to say more about it. So you should be fine saying, nope, I'm not applying for need-based aid, but submit the FAFSA for those other things. I've been around this block enough to know that the way different schools make their determinations about all different things varies quite a bit. And I think at most schools, you will be fine doing exactly what we have said. No, I'm not applying for need-based aid, but submit that FAFSA. There may be some schools, though, that just submitting that FAFSA, even though you said no over here, once you submit that FAFSA, now they think you're applying for need-based aid. So what I would do to be extra safe is I would just shoot an email to the school if you're going to be submitting that FAFSA saying, hey, not really applying for need-based aid, just submitted that FAFSA because I'd love to be considered for merit scholarships and student loans. That is all. That just makes extra sure they won't be confused. They won't make any decisions that are inconsistent with what you're actually trying to do. It's probably not necessary at most places, but if you want to be extra safe, make sure that you are not put at any disadvantage in the admissions process. I think I'd probably shoot that email just in case, just to make sure. If the FAFSA wasn't required for merit at those schools where it's not required for merit, you can just wait to file it till after you've been accepted. There's no time limit on when you can get the student loans. If the only reason you're filing the FAFSA is to get student loans, you can do that later in the spring after you've already been accepted, and no need to worry about any need aware issues. But if it is required for merit, so you want to get it in early, that's when you might want to shoot that email. Again, just as case, probably not an issue at most schools, but just to be safe, you might want to do that. And I just also should just step back and say, if you need financial aid, submit the FAFSA, say yes to that question on the Common App. Please do not let fear of it affecting your admissions decision prevent you from filing the FAFSA. There is no use getting into a school if you can't actually afford to pay for it. So if you need financial aid, file the FAFSA, say yes to that question on the Common App, please.
The only other thing that I would add, Shannon, is I do know that from talking to some of our colleagues that actually you could, at some of these need-aware schools, you file the FAFSA, what you are actually giving the school is information about your finances. And it could show them very clearly that you can absolutely afford full price.
Yes.
And that can actually work in your favor. So
Yeah.
that, that's the other thing is it's tough. I think it's never a bad idea to file it, and it may show that you have substantial funds available, and they might be saying to themselves, oh great, this is a family we want, even if you have checked the box, or even if you've checked no, submitting the FAFSA. What I find is that, you know, that can be helpful too.
Yeah, it's very tricky. There's no blanket statements because schools look at these things in different ways.
Right,
So,
which is why I think that email is a good idea,
Yeah.
But may ultimately not be necessary. All right.
Exactly. Yes. All right. So question for you from Lola that she submitted through our Facebook page. So folks, feel free to do that. If you do have a question, just shoot us a message on our Facebook page. But she says, hi, my child is very fortunate to attend a Jesuit high school on a full scholarship for 4 years. Technically, the scholarship was earned before he started high school, so it's not considered an award to be listed on the college applications. All he has to do is maintain a certain GPA, which is the easier part compared to earning it. But should he list it on his applications? If not, is there a place to mention it? Or just don't say anything about it at all? I think either way could make sense. Just wanted to hear what the experts say.
Sure. Well, I actually think that even though he was awarded the scholarship freshman year, it's still something that he essentially is awarded every single year because they're paying for him every single year. So I do think it could go in the honors section. If there's too much that he's already included in the honors section, so if he has other stuff that maybe takes priority, it could go into the additional information section. I think either place would be fine. I don't think you really need a long explanation, but simply a note that he was awarded this scholarship and that it's renewable for all 4 years, I think would be fine.
Perfect.
All right. Shannon, next question from Kate. My question is regarding how to best use a College 529 plan saved by my children's grandparents. I understand that since the plan is saved by the grandparents, it's not reported on the FAFSA until my children pull from it, in which case it's counted as income to my child. So I've heard it is best to wait until their junior year to start using these funds to pay college expenses. Is this true? I have 2 children, 2 years apart, as well as a stepchild the same age as my youngest. At this point, my oldest is interested in getting a medical degree, so she could potentially have many years of education ahead of her. Can you advise on the best timing and use of their 2 529 funds? They both have close to 60,000 each in the 529s, a sizable amount, but still not enough to cover college depending on the schools they choose. I will likely qualify for some need-based assistance for my daughter's freshman year, but not her sophomore year. Her junior year, I will have all 3 in college. There's a lot going on in that.
There is. And I am about to blow your mind, Beth.
I know you are. I know what you're going to say.
She says that I have heard that it's best to wait until junior year to start using these funds. And 99% of the time, when a question starts with, I heard that,
it's wrong.
What is about to come out of their mouth? Not this time. She's right. I don't know who she's listening to, but they are a trusted source. Maybe it's from listening to this podcast, right?
Exactly.
If that's where you heard it, this is a good source of information. But yeah, you are absolutely right about when to use the money. The issue here is that when they ask this kind of nasty question on the FAFSA that says, they ask the student, did you receive any gifts or have any bills paid on your behalf by anyone other than your custodial parents? And if so, report the amount here. We're going to count it as student income. So if grandma pays the tuition bill, that money counts as student income. The sort of convenient thing in this situation is that the FAFSA, this is very inconvenient for some other situations, but the FAFSA is a little bit delayed in what income it looks at. It's always looking at your income from 2 years prior to the year you're applying for aid for. That is not helpful if you lose your job and your income has decreased since 2 years ago. But in this situation, it is helpful. So if you kind of work through a timeline, essentially give or take, because the academic years don't exactly line up with the calendar years, but essentially if grandma paid for freshman year of college, that would be reported on the student's junior year financial aid application because it's 2 years in the future. Grandma
Right.
paid for sophomore year, that would be reported on the senior year financial aid application. And then there are no more financial aid applications. So anything grandma pays towards junior and senior years of college never get reported on a financial aid application. So you're absolutely right that it is best to use that money for financial aid purposes. It is best to use that money for junior and senior years of college, because then it will never hurt you on a financial aid application. The only other things I would say in terms of things to think about in timing, the timing of when to spend a 529 kind of in general, would be there are some competing arguments as a tax deferred account, eventually tax-free as long as you use the money for college, that tax-free growth is maximized the longer you leave the money in the account. So that would argue also for leaving it in there a little bit longer, save it for junior and senior year. So that is right in line with what we were already thinking would be the best thing you should do. The counter argument would be as an account you have to use for college. Otherwise, you have to pay taxes and penalties on the earnings. You do want to be quite sure that you do use this money. So for some families that would argue for using it right away. If you have enough to pay for 1 or 2 years of college, use it for the first year or two, because what if the kid drops out of college and now you have no college to spend it on, and now you've got to pay penalties to get your money back. For this family where there's 3 kids, it doesn't, and one of them might go to medical school. There's going to be a lot of college there to pay for. So I don't think that's really an issue for this family. If one kid happens to drop out, use it on the other 2 kids. You've got plenty of college to pay for. So I wouldn't worry about that one. And the other issue with spending the 529, you have enough to maybe pay for a year or 2 years, but not the whole thing. One thing to think about would be federal student loan eligibility is limited on an annual basis. And if you say decline the student loans for the first year because you didn't need them yet, maybe you got enough in that 529 to totally pay for the first year, you can't add that amount that you declined onto the sophomore, junior, senior year amount. Once you've declined it for freshman year, it's gone. You can't get it, senior year when you might really need it. So since those federal student loans tend to be the most favorable loans there are, you probably want to take advantage of them all along, hold some back in your 529, don't spend it right away, so you can take advantage of that good loan eligibility as opposed to having to borrow worse loans later down the line. Right. So that's something that's applicable to, kind of everybody thinking about when to spend the money if there's not enough to cover everything. But particularly for this family, I think everything points to save that money for later on in the process.
All right. I think we have room for one more question before we go to break.
Yes. So Todd asks, my 12th grader has test scores that will boost her admission to most of her chosen schools. And actually, I'm sorry, I skipped a question.
No, go with this one. We'll
go with
get
that
to
one.
the
Okay.
other one. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. And since she homeschooled through 10th grade, we think she probably needs to include them in her applications. She took the ACT after 10th grade and got a 30 with a 33 and 34 in the 2 non-STEM sections, but only a 25 in math. She took the SAT this August and got a 1340 with a math 660. Google reports that her SAT, composite, and math scores both convert to about 28s on the ACT. Her guidance counselor advised her to submit only her ACT score. Is there any advantage to submitting the ACT and SAT for the better SAT math score? Her reach schools are Clemson, UNC, and Davidson. We live in North Carolina. The rest of her application is solid, including her transcript.
Okay, so the core of the question is really, she has a 30 on the ACT, a 1340 on the SAT, and the math is a 660 on the SAT and a 25 on the ACT. And that 660 translates to about a 28 on the ACT. And I would say that there may not be an advantage, but there is no harm. So I would submit the ACT, which is the slightly better test score
Overall, yeah.
overall, but submit the SAT as well. They may not look at it. It may not make it into the electronic version of the application because the better score, the ACT, may supplant any other testing, but they may see both sets of scores. And you know, it's we're really splitting hairs here. And I think in general, what they're going to rely on is that 30, but there's no harm in them seeing that she tested slightly better in math on the SAT. And there's especially no harm because she homeschooled early. And whenever you homeschool, the more support you can give to the grades earned when the student was homeschooling, when presumably you were giving her grades, not always, but often they're given by the parent. It's nice to support that with some testing or a course at a local community college or university where they know a little bit about the governing body in those cases, or they can compare those test scores to other students' test scores. So my bottom line here is I don't know that it will provide an advantage, but I don't think it's a disadvantage. I don't see any harm in submitting those test scores. So I would say go for it. All right, we are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to get to more of the questions that we have from you guys. So don't go away.